Hello and welcome to On the Fly, a Financial Literacy Institute podcast. Tonight, I am your host, Zach Owen, and I am joined by my two co hosts, Sean Lacey and Olayinka Famodu. Tonight, Olayinka Famodu is our subject in part two of a three-part series, diving into the who, what, when, where, and why of the three of us, our financial backgrounds, why we got into it. And the goal of this is to kind of show you, the listener, something to relate to, something to be entertained by, or maybe even inspired by our stories, how we got into finances and how we're doing and what we plan on doing in the future. So, Sean, how was your week? Yinka, how was your week? I'm having a great one so far and excited to get started tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zach. Thanks for kicking us off. It's been a great week so far. It's been really busy. Work is always picking up, so cannot complain. But I'm excited to hear what Yinka has to say and even learn a little bit about him too. So can't say I can't be more excited for it.
I love it. I love it. No, thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to it as well. No, my week. I mean, as you guys know, school started. Welcome back, Zips. Right, go Zips. And I kid you not, like my brain activity. Yep, 100% leftover right. One of the two ways. The brain activity for this whole week has been just so crazy. Like I've had a million things to do every single day. My calendar is literally looking like Tetris. Right, it's like so many things. And I'm being very productive, very effective. Time's going by like this because I'm just not paying attention to it. So I like it. It's a lot. It's not sustainable, but it's the first week, right? So looking forward to the whole semester. But yeah, no, this week has been good and went by very fast. It's already Thursday. It's crazy.
Awesome.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It
Bingo.
does. So, Yinka, before we really dive in here, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who is Olayinka Famodu so we kind of know who we're talking to here.
It's a great question. That's a great question, right? So Olayinka Famodu. Let me start with the professional stuff, right? I am a fifth year biomedical engineer at the University of Akron, studying biomedical engineering, but also minoring in applied mathematics. People will ask Lincoln, like, why did you study or why did you choose biomedical engineering? And I had a lot of uh, an influence from my dad being a civil and aeronautical engineer. So STEM was kind of in my DNA. But if I knew what I knew now, would I choose engineering or biomedical engineering? Probably not. Nonetheless, I like the way it makes me think, but I probably would have chose finance if that wasn't already obvious. But I'm big into kind of development on all facets, right? So I love reading self-help books, love listening to podcasts, love creating podcasts. I really do tap in development at a high level, and I try to put my friends on with it. So it's super fun to kind of level up and be better than you were, the day before. So that's kind of what I tap into. So nutrition, diet, I guess nutrition, hitting the gym, fashion, all kind of facets, like I mentioned. So kind of big into self development. And then really, I kind of a sport guy as well. People asking, well, you're from Minnesota. Why did you go to University of Akron? And it's like, well, my freshman year I played Division I soccer, so I played soccer at a high level and it was super fun. But then I was quick to realize that D1 soccer and engineering, it's a tough mix. So I dropped the D1 soccer and went with the engineering and stuck with University of Akron because I had options to kind of go back home to study. I'm like, my roots are good here, and Akron pays me a lot of money and I get a lot of actually refunds. So it's like, why not stay? And I don't regret that decision. I don't regret dropping the soccer, and I don't regret not moving. So I enjoyed my time at University of Akron, and I have 8 months left. So super excited. Big into, like I said, soccer, table tennis, spike ball. I'm getting into golf, as Zach knows and Sean knows. So I'm excited to play some golf with you guys. But yeah, I'm just a guy who's very. I love being positive. I love hanging out with people. I'm very social. People know me. I can talk to anybody. People like to say I have a flirty personality. You can flirt with guys, you can flirt with girls. I'm just that kind of guy. So yeah, that's kind of what Yink is all about. I'm just doing a lot of things at once. But what I had a lot of people tell me is like, Yink, live in the moment, like enjoy yourself, because my head's always 10 years down the line. Because I swear graduation is gonna come out like this, and I'm just gonna walk across the stage and I'm never gonna remember it again. Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm already 20 years down the line. So, but it's like, relax. It only comes once, like the Alchemist book says. Things that happen once will never happen again. So yeah, that's kind of what Ink is all about.
Awesome. Love to hear it. So, one of the bigger points of this series is to kind of let our listeners who may be newer, beginners, or maybe even intermediates in the financial space, beginning their own financial journeys, or maybe just picking up speed and getting the ball rolling, right? So, where did you start, right? Where were your beginnings? What inspired you, and kind of what have you done to kick off your financial journey?
Great question. I'm going to expand on, our intro videos, all three of us that we did a couple weeks back, right? So really where it started for me, or where it really didn't start, I should say, I kind of realized that the conversation about money in my household, like where I grew up with my mom, my dad, that either wasn't talked about, or if it was completely negative, right? So my parents would, and this is nothing on my parents. They're, it's kind of generational where they heard what they heard from their parents. Now I'm hearing what I heard from what they heard, kind of thing, right? But then when I was hearing it, I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with that. Why? Maybe because I was always a learner, a self learner, let's say reading the books or listening to podcasts or doing all things where it's like, I'm not saying I don't want to listen to my parents, but I'm listening to a lot of sources who are doing better than my parents saying what my parents aren't, right? So it's like, I don't think that's 100% right. So what my parents were always saying was just like, the love of money is evil, right? Or the root of love, the main mantra that a lot of people get confused about, right? But then another thing was people who are wealthy are very greedy. And it's like, I just don't think that's true. I just think that the fact that maybe my parents don't have that kind of money, maybe they're envious, and that's okay. A lot of people are, as I was when I was younger, looking up to the bigger dogs, like, wow, they have a lot of these assets or a lot of this, capital that I wish I would have. So I kind of look up and I'm like, dang, you had opportunities I didn't have. But then I thought about it, like, I think you can do that yourself. So before I digress, really, it kind of started with the conversation that wasn't had with my family, right? But then, really, I think the thing where it actually had happened, the actual conversation, which I mentioned in the intro, was the Christmas girlfriend story, as you guys remember, right? So I'll kind of expand a little bit about that. So, like I mentioned, this was I want to say, if I remember correctly, sophomore year or junior year, is one of the two, maybe the summer before. I don't know. No, it wasn't the summer because it was during Christmas. I was dating this one girl at Richfield High School back at home, and she was another soccer player as myself, right? So everyone was like, Yinka, and we kind of, we have the same skin tone. So people are like, Yinka, you and her, you guys would look good together. And I was attracted to her. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the girl of my dreams. She plays soccer. Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna date her. I'm very much, again, a ladies guy, so I can talk to any lady, talk to her. Started dating her, and I'm like, oh, this is the one, as any young boy would say when he's young and dumb, right? And I thought when it came Christmas time, my first Christmas, I'm gonna get this girl everything she wanted, right? So I asked her, what's your Santa Christmas list? Tell me, show me the whole thing. She was reluctant at first. I'm like, don't worry about it. Let me da. And I'm like, I finally got the list. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this. And why? Because I was working a job. I think I was working at like a little ice arena, making maybe what, like $7-8 an hour, something small, right? And I'm like, okay, I have maybe roughly like $700 in my account. And I think I'm balling. I think I'm a millionaire or whatever that age was, right? So I'm like, okay, if I add almost all these things up, or don't even add, doesn't matter. If I get everything on this Christmas list, I could probably afford it. So my smart self, I think a week before Christmas, went to Mall of America, one of the biggest malls in the world, if not the biggest. And I bought her like Hollister jeans, her Converse shoes. I think she had like a necklace on there, some Victoria's Secret like sweater, all the things that the young girl at that age wanted, right? I bought it all, probably racked up over $500, right? And I'm like, okay, she's gonna like this, and I'm gonna be the boyfriend of the century. Mind you, probably I think it was the day before Christmas Eve. Again, after I bought the stuff, I brought it home and I try to hide it just in case any of my parents came into my room and saw it, because I want them to know about that. Hid the receipt. Again, the day before Christmas Eve, I come into to my room, and I'm preparing because the next day is Christmas to go over to her house and lavish her with all these gifts. I try to find the receipt for some reason and I couldn't find it. I'm like, okay, did I misplace it? And no, just couldn't find it. Later that night, mom calls me in the living room, Yinka, come here. And when she says she said Olayinka, my full name, Olayinka, come here. When the parents say the full name, you're in trouble. Called me in, dad was quiet. When dad is quiet, you're in real trouble, right? And they sat me down. She pulls out the receipt. I'm like, oh, I'm in for it. And long story short, they were really explaining to me, right, what the purpose of money is. And really, this is not the best way to try to win over a girl, right? Because once you get them all the gifts, what's next? You got what Mercedes 500. You got the the mansion. Like you start the bar so high that it can only go higher, right? So start small, but that's a whole other conversation on how to get relationships. Whatever. I really was taught that money is not just you earn it and then you immediately spend it because you keep it in your bank account. If you keep it in your bank account long enough, the government's going to take it, right? And that's something that's very interesting. That's like a common misnomer amongst a lot of people, that if you just keep your money in your accounts, that the government's going to, if you owe maybe the government money, they can just tap in, to your account. Now that's a whole different conversation if you're not paying bills, but nonetheless, it's just like, it's just so interesting how there's so many things that aren't, spoken, and that us as children kind of understand. But it was that conversation that night. I'm like, okay, wow. Now I had a conversation about money. It's serious. They took my debit card from me, which was really good. I really had to have that experience to learn, okay, how to manage your money, right? So I was using cash. I was kind of doing like a little mental budget at the time. So really, to answer your question, Zach, it was that catalyst of a moment that was like, okay, this is what really money is about. It's not just some, you earn it, you immediately spend it. And then really from there, I took a little like financial literacy type class in high school, or later on in high school, like the senior year before college, which is timely. And it was run by Dave Ramsey. I don't remember exactly, what the course was called, but it was very interesting because the professor only put like Dave Ramsey videos on. I swear the professor really didn't say anything. She just put on the videos, and that's what we learned from. But I'm not mad at it because I learned a lot from that, right? And obviously the Dave Ramsey talks about, trying to go to school debt free, trying to pay everything in cash, don't use credit cards, all these things, which I subscribe to, right? And then ever since from there, I just like my parents, right? I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure you can do more than just pay everything with cash, because that's probably not 100% sustainable. And then two, if you use credit cards correctly, you can probably get away with using them, right? So I try to do more of my own learning, right? So then continuing, college, I did some more learning. I tapped into more podcasts right at the time. Anthony O'Neill, he was a personality of Dave Ramsey, and he is a guy who is of color. And what's really cool is that the way he disseminates his information is very cool. It's very hip. It's very jive, where a lot of people can kind of tap into it. So I'm like, okay, this guy's cool. I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to try to put a lot of my friends onto it because I'm seeing changes myself. I read a couple of his books, Debt Free Degree, I think 5 Common Mistakes of College Students, something like that, really short reads. And it was more of that kind of information that was like, okay, I'm seeing some traction now. I can actually see some money in my account. I can actually do some more things, and maybe let's look into investing, right? So now we move into probably the start of my junior year in college. And this is where I think COVID struck, right? Or no, it was end of sophomore year. And I'm like, okay, I have some capital. Markets are down. This is a prime time to start investing, as a lot of people thought, right? But I didn't know how. And there's a ton of videos out there, but you never really know what's real. And they're always trying to get you to hop on their affiliate account or do X, Y, Z. I'm not trying to do that. So I was reading a ton of books. I even tried to reach out to Anthony O'Neill, and at the time it didn't work out until actually later on I got him to kind of speak to the University of Akron through ZPN. That's a whole nother story, but it's really cool. But I tried to talk to my brothers. I tried to talk to, my brothers-in-laws, and I finally started to understand, okay, Roth IRAs, Vanguard, general investing. Okay. I started to do some more research. I read the Little Book of Common Sense Investing, John C. Bogle, right? Really interesting books, where I started opening my account, super easy, tapped into Graham Stephan, little easy kind of video on how to open up your Roth IRA. And I started investing, starting to see a little bit of money every single month kind of tap in, right? Which is really cool. And then it's very interesting, right? Because with a lot of things, once you start to see more traction, you start to double down. So what did I do? I started to invest more. I started to look into other accounts. I started to learn more. It's very interesting, right? But again, I think ever since from there, it was just more learning, joined FLI, kind of expanded upon that. But really, again, as you guys know, I kind of go off in tangent. But to answer your question, it was really that negative moment of just like, wow, I'm trying to be the most perfect boyfriend, and I think money is just completely expendable, right? And it was that moment that I really needed to kind of, take money to the next level for me.
Absolutely. And I think two things that I want to stress and take away kind of from what Yinka said is, number one, the story of like how each of us found our financial niche, or found like that light bulb moment where we decided, listen, we need to figure this out, is different for every single person. You heard Zach's last week, you're hearing Yinka's now. But another thing that we started doing about this week for our mastermind members is we asked them, what is your light bulb moment? And the cool thing about that is every single person has given a different answer. So the biggest thing I want to stress is that every situation is your situation is not going to be the same as Jenka's, not going to be the same as Zach's. It's not going to be the same as 99.9% of the population. But the thing that is cool about that is that even though the situations are different, each of us have still found a way to learn or to gain the knowledge and then put ourselves on the path towards financial freedom. So in the mission of FLI, our goal is to teach you this financial literacy skills that you didn't learn in school. And that path is different for every single person. And as Jinka's going to dive into more, there's things that you can learn from his path that'll keep you from making certain mistakes. There's things that you learn from Zach's path, and there's things that hopefully you learn from mine. But it's not a one size fits all journey.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because there's no cookie cutter way to kind of learn, right? You kind of just need to have it happen to you for you to kind of have it click, right? So that's what I want listeners kind of take away from the story when I tap into it and you guys ask me questions. It's not, okay, how did Dinka do it? I'm going to emulate that. No. How did Sean do it? I'm going to emulate it. How does that? No. When it happens to you, you'll notice, you're like, okay, now I got to start making changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of that mindset flip, right? Where you get that drive and desire to learn about it, right? Because you want to change something. You want to make sure that you're set up for your future, that you set up for your now. And, the only way to go about changing something you don't know is to learn about it, right? So Inka, that was a great story, great moment. You had a conversation with your parents. It was kind of that light bulb moment for you. What steps have you taken since, right? So kind of we led up to kind of your college years and to high school. When we get into college, a lot of people become a little more independent, right? We have a lot more control over our finances. We start to get into it. We, maybe sometimes people get their first bank account or, their first debit or credit card. So a lot of life changes are happening in college, including some financially. So what were some of those life changes financially or maybe even otherwise in college, and how did you use them to your advantage?
Great question. And two come to mind, right? The first one is the credit card. And I think I got this again earlier sophomore year. My girlfriend at the time, she had Discover, and a lot of people they'll do with Discover if you like I think they have like some sort of affiliate program. When you give someone like your link, you both get $100, which is really cool. Like, okay, how can you not win with that? And what's really cool about Discover, its acceptance rate is very high. So I remember I was applying for Capital One, I was applying to other credit card issuers, and I just got denied a couple times. And it was just weird, like maybe because I just have no credit. I don't have bad credit. I just really don't have really that much credit, right? But Discover, I'm like, okay, acceptance is pretty high, and let me get $100. So I applied, got it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be very responsible with this. I'm going to do what 99% of people don't. So I'm make sure, and this is how I started too. I thought I was going to get just like a gallon of milk per month, just a $3 purchase, one little purchase, because I just didn't know that much at the time. But I knew I could manage it if I could learn more. But I didn't know that much at the time. I'm going to buy a gallon of milk, put it on the cart, and pay it off either right after I purchase it or at the end of the month, just to make sure like I'm building just a little bit of credit, right? Because at that time, my mindset was I just want to build credit, not how can I use credit cards to my advantage. I didn't think about that at the time, right? Now I'm doing that, but that's a whole other story. So credit card for me, it was good, building the credit. And I'm like, okay, well, my credit limit at the time of starting was probably like $1,250. And I was using, again, at the time, probably $10 a month. So I'm like, okay, let me do a little more with that. And I started to, I think I watched the movie, no, I did, Catch Me If You Can, right? And beautiful movie, by the way, where Frank Abagnale, the main character, the one who's played by, I think, what's his name? DiCaprio. I think Leonardo DiCaprio, right? I looked up Frank Abagnale after that because it's a fire movie, and he had a Google speech and you guys, if you guys, the listeners, please look this up. Frank Abagnale Google Talk, and he talks about how he makes his kids strictly use credit cards, never debit cards. Why? Two reasons. Number one, you have no liability. He says that if he was to walk down the street and someone was to mug him and ask him for his credit card, he would hand him the credit card and say, "Do what you will," right? Because if the robber took any of the money in the credit card, you are not liable. You're good. So when I understood that reason, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Number two is if you're responsible and you're going to make the purchase anyway, why not on the credit card? Because you're going to earn things, whether it's you're building your credit, you're getting cash, you're getting miles, you're getting points. If you're going to make the purchase anyway, why not on the credit card? Why the debit card? You get nothing. And it's direct access to your account. That goes back to the first point, right? So with those two reasons right there, I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. I'm never using my debit card again. So credit card right there, and I started to learn more how you can kind of use it to your advantage. So that was the big thing, right? Credit card, and that's why I'm big into credit cards now, because they just make so much sense if you know how to utilize them. So that's the first one. The second big thing that happened in my college career, like I mentioned in the prelude story, was I wanted to destroy actually two debts. The first one was my car, which I did, and again I kind of tapped into that story. And for me, I was paying I think $232 per month on my 2011 Honda Accord. Bought it used for I think 12K, which is crazy amount for a 2011 Honda Accord. I'm hearing some people get like 2016 cars for like under 4K. I'm like, huh? But whatever. Maybe it was on. Maybe there was those cars over 100,000 miles. My car was pretty decent. Nonetheless, I was tired of paying $232 a month. What I tried to do was pay more towards the principal, right? And for our listeners, when you pay more towards the principal, you're kind of at an advantage because it's accruing less interest on the principal. Little point there, right? With any loan, try to pay towards the principal. It's got a big hack there. Nonetheless, I was like, okay, let me try to see if I can pay $500 a month, right? Decrease the amount of time it would take for me to pay off the full loan. Started to do that. I even started to increase, the amount that I was paying. But for me to do that, I had to make more money, right? And how did I make more money? At the time, I was an RA, so I was getting paid, probably about $10 working behind the desk, like 18 hours a week or something like that. I worked for ZPNs, it's a programming network. I think making $15 an hour. Pretty cool job, but it was very time demanding. And then the third job, which is off campus, I was working at Chipotle. And Chipotle, $12.75, something small. But with all those three incomes, as a student as well, working, probably over 40 hours cumulatively, I was able to, within probably under a year after making the decision to pay more towards the car, I paid it off, right? And my last payment, it was a whole SMART goal system too. I'm like, I'm going to pay it off before the end of the spring semester. And come, I think, April 9th, I'm not going to forget the day. I don't know why I said think. Before the end of the semester, I paid that car off. It was great. And it was free because now that frees up $232. I can do more things with it, whether it's investing, whether it's I can implement it into my expenditure budget of just like hanging out with friends or dining or whatever, right? And it was a really good decision. But then the second debt I wanted to pay off, but then I thought a little more about it, was my student loan debt, right? Because I'm not going to lie to you guys. When I came to the University of Akron, I was an RA in my first year. Division I soccer didn't pay a lot of scholarships, and I just wasn't getting a lot of scholarships, right? So I did have to, take out a little bit of loans. And I, going with the whole Dave Ramsey mindset and how freeing the car debt was paying off, I'm like, let me pay off my student loan debt. But then I thought about it more, right? Okay, if my student loan debt at the time was, very low, but then come COVID, it actually was paused. Why not, use interest to my advantage where, let's say even it wasn't paused, and let's say interest is like 3%, right? 3.5%, doesn't matter. But yet, if I invest that money, now I get it at 8%. What was that, 4.5% increase, right? I'm like, instead of paying off my loans, I can now take that same money and I can invest it and gain more. And that's what I ended up doing, right? So my long-term play was, I'm going to graduate debt-free 100%. And now I'm extra going to graduate debt-free from the news that just dropped, which is crazy. Love that. When I read that news again today, I'm like, wait a second, I almost paid off all my debt. And sorry to the people out there who already paid their debt. I'm sorry to you. I deeply am. But like for me, I'm like, oh no, not Sean. But I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I did that. All right, I didn't do that, I should say. Nonetheless, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to graduate debt-free now. Or not back then again, before I knew this debt relief. But I'm like, I'm going to use that money to my advantage, right? So I ended up not paying off that debt because there's a ton of I'm now going so hard in scholarships, because what's really cool about school, they'll give you refunds on your scholarships which you can theoretically use for whatever you want. So I get it straight to my checking account and I use it for school purchases. They don't need to know that, right? So it's really, and I invest it, right? No. So it's a super logistical thing to do, when you look at the interest rates. And that was kind of my two things in college, right? It was the credit card and it was the debt payoffs, right? Or one of the debt payoffs. So those two things really set me up to kind of now take it to the next level of where I am.
Absolutely. I love it, Yinka. And I think so. I guess I want to pivot a little bit away from, your financial story and kind of into your background personally. So I want to give a little backstory of kind of how I met Yinka. So I would say probably a year and a half ago, I get this LinkedIn message from this random guy because I was working with the Akron Co-op office to set up a nice little presentation speech about financial education, investing, like kind of the preface of FLI. So I get this LinkedIn message from this guy I've never heard of, never met before, and he's talking about Dave Ramsey, talking about like Anthony O'Neill, bringing him to Akron and speaking events like this. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like I've never heard anyone really, like a college student, talk like this. And the way he worded everything, he's very professional about it. I'm like, this is cool. So time, maybe 3-4 months go by, and I do this speaking event at the College of Engineering, and Yinka comes up and introduces himself after I'm done, or before I start actually. And this man's carrying his MacBook in one hand, his cell phone in the other hand. He's like,
Yep.
"Oh, I have so many questions I want to ask you, like blah blah blah." And he's like, I'm like, "Okay, absolutely, just ask him during." He's like, "Oh, I trust me, you don't want me to ask him during because we're gonna spend the whole time talking about that." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, fair enough." So I give the presentation, it goes well. I hang around for another 15-20 minutes after talking to people, and Yinka comes up again. And first of all, he said, "I'm really interested in this Financial Literacy Institute idea you have, but I have this list of 75,000 questions that I want to ask you. Would you like to grab dinner and go over it?" And both him and then Josh, who's one of our ambassadors, and another one of their friends, Ryan, were there too. And they're like, "Let's go grab dinner. Let's do that." So I'm like, okay, number one, this is cool because it takes a lot for a college student to ask, a random person that they just met to meet with them, grab dinner, number one. And I'm by no means an imposing person. I look just like them and probably younger than most of them. But, somebody that's out of college and kind of in the professional workforce, it takes a lot of guts to ask that. So I respected Yinka from the get-go. And then we started texting. He started asking me some questions. We had dinner. He went, like, Yinka probably talked 95% of the time. I don't think Josh and Ryan got any questions in, but I began to pick up the vibe that Yinka moves 100 miles an hour all the time, and he doesn't stop, and his mind is always working, which is how he's scaled this knowledge of financial literacy and investing and budgeting and all the above so quickly. Like, Yinka, if you look back 2.5 years ago, from where you are now to where you were then, it's night and day. Like, I guarantee you, Yinka back then looks at Yinka now and is like, holy hell, like, how, there's no way I can do this. So the other kind of cool thing that I've picked up from being around you and being involved in this with you is your 5 Fs. So that's kind of like, that's Yinka's brand, is the easiest way I can describe it. So in my
Awesome.
long-winded statement question here is, Yinka, can you go into the 5 Fs?
Let's do it. Let's do it. That's so funny you remember that, because I actually pivoted from like the 5 Fs. I'm not saying it's still there, but now I'm actually focusing on like spiritual, emotional, financial, and physical, as you kind of know with the standard and whatnot. But before, it's so funny you remember that. Yeah, I was always the guy. I would call it the Famodu 5 Fs, right? A bunch of alliteration all the way in here, right? And I would say in this order too, right? Faith, fitness, finance, and faction. When you have these four in order, the fifth, females, are inevitable, right? Now that would apply a lot to men, and it's kind of hard to say that out in public. So I kind of pull a guy aside when I see he has a mindset like me, and I kind of talk to him. Okay, who are you about? And then I kind of impose. Okay, here are the 5 Fs. What, like, where are you at with that, right? So for me, back in the day, I guess it was a year ago, not back in the day, but I was really all about those 5 Fs, and I would always tell people about them. And as Sean, as you just mentioned, I am really embodied a lot of that. I still do to this day. Even like I just love dressing up. I love fashion. I just love how it looks. It's super nice to just just look good every single day. And then with your finances, and I like to tell people within those 5 Fs, the one that gave me the most confidence was my finances. It's so interesting. Once I gained the confidence from that, like I can do this. Then I was like, okay, fitness, I can do this. Faith, I can do this. Fashion, I can do this. Females, I can do this. So confidence is very multifaceted, as we talked about several podcasts ago. And really, finance kind of gave me that one, right? And with those 5 Fs, it's very interesting because, like I mentioned, I kind of pivoted to more of a holistic kind of view of it, which is, again, not alliteration per se, but I like it a little bit better because not only is it four, and again, it takes out the females of it, and it can really be with anybody, male, men or women. It's the pillars of physical, financial, spiritual, and emotional. And with those four, I very much try to implement at least one, if not two things, daily to those things, right? So whether it's me waking up every morning and, saying a prayer before, I do anything else, or me trying to meditate a little bit before I do anything super extensive, or even me checking my budget every single day to kind of know where I'm at down to the penny, or me dressing and looking good every single day, right? Or even me getting in the gym at 6 a.m. every weekday, trying to, get to my best physical self, right? So really a lot of those things I just mentioned, if not a ton more, really kind of, come onto those pillars of the physical, emotional, financial, and emotional, right? So, but I just want to circle back really quickly. It's so funny that you mentioned that story, Sean, because it's, that really goes to show, I want listeners to understand this, is like, Sean, when I noticed Sean, and when I met with Stephanie Schindewolf, right, she was just hyping you up. She's like, yeah, I love Sean, great student, and he's really giving back and giving a finance speech, which nobody does. And I don't know if I told you this, Sean, this story. I might have, I might not have, but I don't know if the listeners know. I almost didn't go to the event, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. It's because I was studying for an exam that night. Just quick story, right? It was very interesting. I think it was a basic electrical engineering exam I had, and basic E. I was getting clapped in that class, but nonetheless, like those little things are so like college. But then what I went to this event now, FLI, like that's years. So I'm glad I went to this event, right? Nonetheless, I was studying with several of my friends, and there was we were studying for this FAT exam. It was a midterm, and I almost didn't go because I wasn't doing the best in the class. I'm not gonna be honest with you. And was it because I am just not a good student? Yes and no. No, because I just don't care about the information, and then yes, because I just don't care. Nonetheless, I ended up going, and I'm so happy I did. And I thought there would be more people, but it's unfortunate. Not a lot of students care about money or care about finance. They don't take it seriously at this age, right? So there's probably less than like 15 people in that presentation. And when I saw Sean up there, I'm like, he's dressed well. Presentation looks clean. And just as Sean mentioned, I had my computer, had my phone with kind of some pre-questions before I even shook hands with the guy. Because I'm like, okay, I got to ask this guy questions because I looked him up on LinkedIn because I remember I connected with you a long time ago. And I did mention to Sean, I'm like, I have a ton of questions for you, but I'm going to wait until the end. He gave the presentation. He mentioned a little bit of FLI, but he was in the works of it, so he didn't want to speak too much about it. But I made it a point. I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait until everybody at the end of the presentation, everybody goes up, asks their questions, shakes his hand, and as they leave, I love to do this. I always am the last person. If I'm not the first person into the room to get quality time, I'm the last because you want to get quality time with a person, whether it's a professor, whether it's a person you really want to talk to. You want to get quality time with that person, right? So when everybody left, I got quality time with Sean. But I just made sure I didn't want to take too much of his time. So that's why I asked him, hey, let's go get dinner one day. And it's on me. And it's funny because come dinner time, he didn't let us pay. That's how you know Sean's an awesome guy. But when we went to go, at O'Shea's and have some dinner, we had amazing conversations. We were talking about books. He even shared with me a Spotify motivation playlist. And it was just very enlightening to see, a wholesome man as Sean in the workforce as an alumni, really spending time where he could have been anywhere else that night and spend time with us and pay on top of that, right? So I'm like, hey, this guy's real. Like, I like this guy, right? And I made sure to, get his contact information. I asked for his number before, we left. And like Sean mentioned, probably a couple months after that, because we did talk about FLI just a little bit. A couple months after that, into like December, it was when Sean hit me up. He's like, "Yeah, I'm taking FLI to the next level. Are you in?" And I'm like, "Hey, I don't know much about owning a business. I never owned a business. I know you have your detailing business, and I don't really know much about the legal or the logistics behind actually formulating it. But when it comes to like motivation, when it comes to determination, when it comes to grit, when it comes to even like the things that I will bring to the table, I'm there, right?" And then he said, "Yeah, I have my best friend Zach join in. Is that okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, 100%. More the better, right?" And to this day, I'm still yet to meet Zach in person. I'm looking forward to meet Zach in person. But when FLI was finally created, we were doing all the paperwork. It was super cool. I remember, Zach didn't have his camera at first. It was so funny, right? And just where we are now, just like you mentioned, Sean, Yinka, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to Yinka now, would be like, whoa. But then even just look at us, where we are 8 months from where we were. It's like, whoa. And where are we going to be, which is crazy, right? But that just all goes to say, going back to those 4 kind of pillars and kind of pivoted from the 4 Fs. When you kind of know what you're all about and what you embody, and that's why they're called pillars, because pillars usually put things on top of, right? That's the base, that's the foundation. Everything on top of that is built on those pillars, right? And that's kind of what I try to do every single day. Those are my non-negotiables, my essentials. And I very much have seen growth from those and surround myself with like-minded people who embody those.
So maybe the new kind of catchphrase is Famodu's Foundation,
Ooh,
something of that
some more
nature.
alliteration. I like that. More
You can
alliteration.
roll that into your nonprofit here in 10 years when you're a multimillionaire. But
Yeah.
no, like Yinka said, when I spoke at Akron, out of every like new person I met that night, because there was probably like 4 or 5 people that I already knew that were there, but out of every new person that I was introduced to, Yinka's the only one I remembered. And the reason why that was is because he was the last person to talk to me, but he also followed up nearly immediately.
Yeah.
Like I gave him my contact information, I gave him my phone number, my email. He shoots me an email like an hour later, thanking me, and then going over kind of some of his questions, but also prepping for us grabbing dinner. So, as kind of a word to advice, whether it's a job interview, whether it's you meeting somebody for the first time,
Yeah.
that putting like being the last person in their mind, whether it's at the event itself or if you send them a follow-up email, a follow-up message on LinkedIn, a follow-up text, that goes such a long way to fostering that relationship and then keeping you fresh in their mind. So whether you apply for a scholarship and you have an interview, whether you apply for a job, you go in for an interview, stuff like that is crucial to keeping you on the mind of the person you want the attention of.
Bingo. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
All right, I'm gonna unmute myself there. I was talking to no one. So, Yinka, that was a lot that I learned about you as well. Like when you said, I haven't met him in person yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So, uh, good story so far. And I know a lot of people, like I said, our listeners are trying to get into or beginners or intermediates in their own financial space. So, Yinka, when you got into finances, um, like what was one of the big first steps, right? I know budgeting is a big one for a lot of people, right? So how
Right.
do you budget? That's a big step for a lot of
Great
people getting
question.
into it. That's the first step, right? Is for them to
Yeah.
track their expenditures and see where they're at. They can gain knowledge and then make changes accordingly. So how do you do
Mm.
that?
That's a great question. Oh my goodness. I love that you asked that question, right? So as I do with everything, I'm gonna give a little story. I I don't know. It's very interesting because back in the day, I was just trying to find the most convenient way to automate, my budgeting. And now, before I actually tell the story, now I do it manually, purposely, right? But then I'll talk about that later. So I was trying to download all these cool looking apps, but also very simple apps that just like if you put in some numbers, I didn't want to mess around with the apps you have to connect your bank accounts to. I'm not saying those aren't legit. Everybody's different. I don't like to do that. So I was trying, all these little apps, and I'm very picky when it comes to my technology, right? If it's not exactly the way I want it, I don't want it. So as Sean and maybe Zach know, I almost was on the brink of creating an app just to do this, right? And that kind of fell through only because now I do it manually, but two, you can really outsource a lot of those things. Nonetheless, kind of the funny story is that when I really got on my budgeting game, which was actually 2 years ago or 2 summers ago, not this summer, but last summer, I, when I was transitioning out from all the apps, but really hunkered down in the budgeting, now I'm doing it manually. I was trying on different spreadsheets, right? The Excel, the Google Sheets, but now trying different modifications. So the funny story is, it was 4th of July weekend, not this last summer, but 2 summers ago, and I was with my girlfriend at the time at her family cabin, and I kid you not, 3-day weekend. It was so bad. I'm not gonna lie, it was so bad. I was on my phone like the whole time. What was I doing though? Just trying to articulate the perfect budget. I kid you not. Like I can remember this so vividly. I was just sitting on the couch, or let's say we're watching a movie, and I'm just over here like I had the Excel app at the time, and I was kind of like, how can I make it look so good, or how can I make it so easy, or how can I make it, just make it so effective. And it's so funny because again, nobody really made a comment on it. But I just know now that's very rude. Like I'm never gonna do that again because now I have a perfect budgeting system in my current state. So when I really understood, okay, I want to manually do it, but then I can, kind of make it in a way that's perfectly tailored to me. What I shifted from was, going from a budget where it was like maybe the 50-30-20 budget, which is really good. Don't mind, like, don't take that for granted, or don't, kind of take that for a loop. But for me, I very much like doing it zero based, right? And that's kind of what we recommend, if I'm not mistaken. But I love doing it zero based because you give every single dollar, a way to go. And I found an app after doing a little bit of manual stuff that kind of did it really well, but not exactly the way I wanted it, right? So Dave Ramsey's, I think, Every Dollar app. It's a green little app for all of our new budgeters. That's probably a pretty good budget if ours isn't, up your alley. I started with it and it was really good because again, any money you kind of put into it, when I say put it into it, like let's say every 2 weeks you get paid $1,000, something like that, right? You're able to kind of, implement that into it. And for the month you get $2,000. You want to make sure that every single dollar up to the 2,000 is going somewhere, whether you keep it in your checking account or whether you pay off your phone bill or whether you invest. Every dollar's going somewhere. I'm like, oh, I like this. I like this. So then now I didn't like the app, but I'm gonna implement that into my personal, manual budget. So me being the Apple guy, I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier when it came to Excel and Google Sheets. I use Apple Numbers, and that's what I currently use to this day. So Apple Numbers is the Apple equivalent of the Google Sheets and the Microsoft Excel. And I formulated and when I say automated, it's like I just type in a couple numbers and the formulas do it all themselves, right? But it's still fairly manual. But I do it very zero based, and I love it. I have a big net worth. It's very reminiscent of our wealth spreadsheet on our website, and I just try my best to get that net worth number as high as I can. I think about it as a game. It's really a game. It's like numbers are a game, and how can I get my net worth number as high as I can, right? Because yes, I might have X amount of dollars in my checking account, but my net worth is negative. Like, that's kind of what I'm aiming for, which is it's a relatively arbitrary number, but it's fun. That's why it is a game. I'm trying to be completely as positive and as high as I can, right? So to really answer your question, it's very manual. It's very, it's manual, but it's automated. It's automatedly manual or manually automated. And it's very good for me, right? But I can't say it works for everybody because for a lot of people, they might use the mints. Again, shout out to Mint, shout out to, every dollar. But for everybody, just budget, because when you start to see like where you go with your money, because even Tyrone as an ambassador, I think that was what he talked about in the Discord. What was his kind of light bulb moment when he doubled down on his budget? He's like, wow, I'm making some co-op money now. And now I actually see where it's going. I have like good amount of money in my Roth IRA. I had a good amount of money in my savings accounts, which if it wasn't my budget, I don't check my accounts every day, or I didn't used to until I had my budget. A budget creates a pattern. It creates habits, and that's what's really good for people, right? So yeah, step one, budget. However you do it.
It's awesome. I love it. Budgets are great. YNAB is another app I want to throw in there. That's the one I'm a fan of. YNAB, Mint, Dave Ramsey's app as well. So budgeting is fantastic. I mean, you put a lot of work in, right, to budget, and then later on, we kind of move into accumulating secondary, tertiary incomes, right? Do you have any plans kind of in the future, or what are you trying to dabble into to earn other sources of income?
Another great question. I'm very interested in the future to I think, Sean mentioned, but I was thinking about this way in the past of, he knows people who, bought liabilities and turned them into assets where you buy it for one time and let's say you rent it out, right? So for example, there's so many avenues I've been looking into, but how lucrative are they? Vary, but how time demanding are they? Vary, right? So just for example, am I really looking into this seriously? No, but I have it in the back of my head, yes. Whether it's like, you buy a car and that's a nice car, let's say a Tesla, and you rent it on Turo. That's something I can see myself doing, right? Or if you have kind of a big parking lot in your future house, you can rent out a section of your parking lot. I think it's called spaces.com. I don't know what it is. Don't quote me on that. But stuff like that, right? Little things. I think that'd be sick. But what am I seriously looking into? I also would really love to, I don't know what it would be about yet, but I think, writing down your life in a book would be really, really cool and what that story is all about. And as Sean mentioned, what his book title would be, I think I can mention mine. My name actually means Olayinka means surrounded by wealth. So I think, and that's pretty, that's pretty convenient, right? And I would name the book that. Very fitting, right? And I would name the book Surrounded by Wealth. I think that'd be super sick. And then it'd be by Olayinka Famodu. And people who understand Nigerian culture, they'd be, oh wow, like that makes sense. So it's kind of a double entendre there, right? So a book, definitely, I think it'd be super cool. Another thing I think would be awesome, which would be, and my girlfriend doesn't like it, but it makes sense, is like a family channel. I think that's super cool. Not to like those weird family channels where the couples do pranks on each other, but just something that's wholesome, something that's like, fun. Maybe the kids can see it in the future someday, right? Because it's so funny. We just recently watched her baby videos the other day, and those are on like DVDs, right? I think the future is like YouTube, or the future is like iPhone videos, right? So it's like they're already in the cloud. I don't have to go and try to find the VHSs, right? So that's kind of my idea on it. And then family channels are just going crazy, whether your kid, I mean, maybe not doing she doesn't like this because she doesn't want the kid like that's the money whore, or the money dog. I was about to say money horse, the money pig, like to like, oh, the kid plays with the toy, and then now it gets a billion views, right? No, that's not what we're doing there. But like, those videos. But I think it's something that's wholesome, something that's fun, something that's like, oh, the Famodu family, right? Because you see some alliteration there. The food, fitness, fashion, the Famodu family, or something like that. I think that'd be awesome. So definitely a family channel. I think that'd be really sick. Another thing would be, I think I was talking to somebody about this. Maybe it was Hafiz. It's like I could see, because he did this as well. He has, the roommates and Affluent Standard, but now his name is a brand. I could see myself, LLCing or branding my name. I think that'd be super cool. I don't make Olayinka Group, Olayinka Associates. I don't know, or Yinka. It doesn't matter. But like, I could be a public figure where I, as you see, I'm very like much a speaker. I would love to give, professional speeches, whether that's again with FLI. Maybe I don't need to do it with my own brand name, or maybe it's a whole different topic that's not like, it could be something completely different than finance and motivation. I don't know what that could be yet, but I would love to utilize that skill, that is speaking and public speaking, to speak to a lot of people, right, and kind of convey a message and change the world with my voice. So that's another thing I can kind of see myself tapping into.
Gotcha. Very cool. So a lot of successes to come, right? But we've worked really hard to get to where we are now and have a lot of successes in the past. So, Yinka, is there something that you have done to celebrate successes, or something that you want to do, something that you like to do, right?
Right. No, that's a beautiful question. Something that I actually recently did that I think you guys might have known, and it is, yeah, I joined the group as Sean did as well. Is the Affluent Standard, and it's a great men's kind of development group. And one thing they like to do is every 3 months they do kind of like a celebratory 1% man weekend, right? What that's comprised of is like, you have parties, networking events, you have dinners, you have seminars, and really those events are essentially for the guys who are like very much go-getters, like all three of us and all the people at the group. It's to kind of spend a little bit of time to take the foot off the gas and celebrate and relax and enjoy the time, right? But even when I was there, because I did go to the event, it was in Miami, in late July, I still did do a lot of the networking and the real development stuff. But I took time to celebrate. I had fun. I relaxed, and we even posted a video on our social media about it. It was really cool, right? So that's something that I can see myself doing more, kind of traveling. I love to kind of spend my money on experiences, whether it's food. I think if you guys read the book, I Will Teach You Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, my money dial, again, if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about, is kind of restaurants. I love, spending and, celebrating per se, at restaurants, really nice, fancy restaurants. So I love doing that. I'm kind of a foodie. So that's, again, to answer that question as well. Traveling, like I just mentioned, spending, kind of nice clothes, kind of getting what I've been budgeting for. That's another great way to celebrate too. If you set a goal with what you want to buy, budget for it, and then once you have the money, you can celebrate it because you budgeted for it. That's a great way to celebrate, right? It's a little tip for people. But kind of those main three things, which is food, travel, and kind of, things I budgeted for, those are kind of how I celebrate.
Awesome. So a lot of goals that we've hit so far, work-wise, and goals celebrating our successes wise, right? So really cool to see you get involved with the Standard, and hopefully I will be soon. But yeah, that trip looked awesome. That looked super fun. So we kind of talked about, what your goals are in the future. Do you have any goals that you are trying to accomplish within the next year?
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful question, right? So I have a SMART goal kind of associated with every one of those pillars, like I mentioned in the past. And for me, my SMART goal for fitness, because I'm kind of getting big into fitness and kind of nutrition, and it might be, big to do by the end of 2022, because that's the timely part of it. It's before 2023, is to kind of get a 9% body fat and weigh 180 pounds by the end of the year. I'm sitting at 170, so 10 more pounds. I don't know. I'm packing and bulking a lot, so we'll see what happens. But for me, is really to have, that really nice physique body, and something that's also in that SMART goal, which is, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, kind of a way to measure that amongst, the metrics and the numbers and how you weigh yourself and how you, track the width of your neck, the width of your thigh, little things like that. How I can also measure how I'm doing with this goal I put into my SMART goal is people kind of saying, Yinka, you look big, or Yinka, are you been working out? Like, people noticing the gains, because it's very interesting. When I'm working out, or even the whole time I have been working out, like a year and a half now, it's so small. It's 1% every day, and I don't see it. But other people who haven't seen me in a year or in a month, they're like, Yinka, wow, you're getting big. And every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, thank you, because that hits. But then that goes back to my SMART goal, right? Because I said that's how I can measure things. It's very interesting, and I'm seeing that. So interesting. So, again, going back to your question, Zach, for me, my biggest goal, again, is to really, at a high level, just be in my best physical shape when it comes to, maybe it's more aesthetic. It's not like, how much I can perform or do the muscle ups, but I just want to look really nice with my shirt off. I think that's
Mhm.
that's a really nice goal. It looks really nice, to have kind of that chiseled body. So, that's kind of my bigger thing
Yeah,
is my body.
that's a good response. Kind of a quick question on that. So the M in
Yeah,
SMART goal is measurable, right? How do you
right.
measure that? Because the way I measure that is with this scale I
Mm,
got on Amazon, and
that's a
I
great
don't
question.
really think it's accurate. So I'd like to hear your method.
No, that's a great question. There's two ways, right? Number one is I actively take photos almost every day when I go to the gym, right? So in the mirror, and it's very interesting because I can scroll all the way back to a year and a half ago. And if you do like I mean, you can see if you do it slow, but if you do like a really, because I also keep it in a little album in my photo album, my iPhone photo album called Fitness. If you scroll really fast, you can start to see little changes in like my pectoral area. And it's okay. I can kind of visually measure that because now I can see changes in my pectoral area because I don't super focus on my chest, but if I was to focus, the most anywhere, it would be my chest. I like that's kind of like the shield of the man. And so that's kind of how I measure it is with the photos. And I'm starting to see, definition in my triceps and my shoulders, right? So that's kind of one method. But when it comes more to the metrics, I use this app. I think it's called Gym Book. It's a red app on the App Store. Again, we're not affiliated with them. It's just an app I like to use. And it's very nice because just like how I'm very, specific with my technology, I was going through a ton of gym apps that you had to like make an account for, or you had to pay for, or there's so many unnecessary features, even if it was free. Then I found this app, came across this app, which was free. You didn't have to make an account for, and it was just the basics. And when I say basics, like good metrics, like it was really nice. None of the BS. So I got into the app, and you can track you can choose your workouts, which is really cool. Track your weights, your reps, your sets, all these kinds of things, and it has kind of a graph with how you're gaining in terms of what you can rep out, if that makes sense, or what have you. But then you can also put in your weight. So to actually answer your question with like, let's say body stuff, I try to at least weigh myself on the first of every month, or at least once a month, right? To kind of see where I am. Maybe I should do it once a week. I don't know. But I like to do it once a month, kind of see where I'm at monthly. But then I also have a little, not a necessary tape measure, but kind of like one of those malleable measures or kind of tapes that I can wrap around my thigh or wrap around my neck to kind of see, what's the diameter of certain body parts to kind of see what's kind of, growing, right? And I can input that in the app and I can see what the last time. So I can kind of see growth in those areas, right? So really answer that question, it's the app and it's the photos. And I think those are really for anybody who can measure or measure kind of this metric when it comes to fitness. I see a lot of people in the gym kind of use a notebook and pen. Hey, if that works for you, great. Just find something that you can measure things with. Because again, what gets measured gets managed. And with my time, with my calendar, my budget, with my my Apple numbers app on my MacBook, and then now this app, the Gym Book app on my phone. These are three things that I measure and I manage unequivocally well. So that's how I do that.
That's a great answer. So this next question, I'll give you two ways to answer this, right? So
Let's do it.
my question is, what's a piece of advice that you would give to someone trying to get into finance, a beginner or an intermediate? And you
Love
can
that.
answer that obviously with a piece of advice, or I'm going to go
Okay.
with recommending a book. Now, if you're feeling
Mm.
adventurous or like an overachiever, you can obviously do both.
Well, you know me, I'm gonna have to do both. I'm gonna answer the first one first, though, right? Like I mentioned before, how I kind of got into it is I follow Anthony O'Neill, right? And what's really cool is that I related with him on so many different things. Even though I didn't know the guy when I started out with him, now I do, which is really cool. Personal, not super personally, but I'm about to too. I'm going to see him in Phoenix when I go on this next standard experience. But and hopefully bring him on the podcast, which would be awesome. I found an individual who was in a niche that I was interested in, or I wanted to gain interest in, and I found someone I can relate to. Right? Not only did he look like me, he spoke like me. He was just cool. He made learning finance like not boring, right? Kind of find a person who is, whether it's finance or anything, find someone who you can relate to, and that makes it very interesting, right? Because it sucks to say, let's say someone is like me, is interested in biomedical engineering, which I thought I was, but I'm learning it from people like the professors who aren't necessarily interesting, and now I don't like it, nor can I relate to it, right? bad example, but all I'm saying is like with finance, I found someone who looked like me, spoke like me, and just made it really cool, right? So that's kind of the first piece of how to get into it for anybody who's interested. Relatability is so key, and that's what we do with FLI. We make things relatable, right? I think that's the key with FLI. But then the second thing, when it comes to books, finance books, I always love recommending the books that can get you to do things right after you read them, if not while you read them. And my book of choice is I Will Teach You to Be Rich, like I mentioned before, because Ramit Sethi really does, speak about very relevant things that, again, you can tap into as you read the book. It's not just theory, it's not just numbers, it's literally practical, applicable things that even I took several things from that book and did it while I was reading, if not after, right? I listened to a ton of his podcasts after too, because that I Will Teach You to Be Rich book was fire, right? So top book was I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and kind of how to go about getting into finance, really to find people or media that really hits and relates with you and you can kind of resonate with.
Awesome. Yinka, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your story with us. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Great question. I don't have a ton of social media, but I am on LinkedIn at Olayinka Famodu. Again, my O has a dot under it. That's actually how my name is spelled. But if you look up Famodu, you can hopefully find me. If not, it's on our website, www.thefli.net. Scroll down, you'll see all three of our LinkedIns, but you'll find mine as well there.
Awesome.
And then,
Sean,
how about you guys?
Yeah, Sean, what about you? Where can we find you?
So you can find me on social media at Sean Lacey 7. That's the branded tagline, registered trademark. Find me on LinkedIn at Sean Lacey, and then also find me on thefli.net. You can check out our bios, check out our profiles on there, and get in contact with us.
Awesome. You can find me, your host tonight, Zach Owen, at ZOwen22 on all social media, as well as at our website that Sean mentioned. Thank you so much for listening. This has been On the Fly, a Financial Literacy Institute podcast.